Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering the woke boycotts. Bud Light may have been an inside job. A whistleblower is now saying they planned a strategic destruction of Bud Light at the executive level of the company. They knew they would damage the brand. They were willing to damage the brand to get labor concessions, to save money on employee benefits, to break the unions, which were very strong ever since they took over the company. They couldn't break the hold the unions had on the cost of labor and the cost of benefits. And of course, they are a woke company. Every company that's a public company is being forced to become a woke company. So they had that added benefit of destroying a true American classic brand. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications and give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. I'm trying to get to 25,000 subscribers, so if you can subscribe, please do subscribe. Thank you for that. This is really a bombshell coming from numerous places. The New York Post, coming from Outkick. It's out all over the place. Anheuser-Busch whistleblower alleges Dylan Mulvaney fiasco was planned, a strategic destruction of Bud Light. I want to get into this story and give you their quotes. This was from an interview he did with Tommy Lahren. But I think this is going to help a lot if I just review quickly some notes that I took from this other great interview with Anson Fredericks. He's a former president of distribution for Anheuser-Busch. He was there for more than 10 years, and he then left the company because it was getting woke. He had had enough of the company. He since went on to join an investment company, so he really does know his stuff. Here's what Anson Fredericks was explaining in this recent interview, and this was prior to the whistleblower coming out. I found this fascinating. Bud Light made up about 40% of the sales of Anheuser-Busch. It was the #1 beer in America. It was almost twice the size of its largest competitor up until a couple of years ago. Anheuser-Busch, Bud Light, never partnered with controversial figures. Never. And Dylan Mulvaney was obviously a controversial figure. That is probably the biggest piece of evidence you could look at and say, wait a minute, if Anheuser-Busch had never partnered with controversial figures before, why now? What's the point of that? As Anson Fredericks explained, and again, the president of distribution for Bud Light, but beyond Bud Light, all of Anheuser-Busch for more than 10 years, he explains Bud Light was a brand for everybody, and it became the largest brand in the US because it was distinctly apolitical, meaning not political. He said it was all about sports, all about music, all about backyard barbecues, things that brought people together. You certainly could never say that Dylan Mulvaney was going to bring people together. It was niche marketing. Maybe there was some intention that they wanted to go and get people like Dylan Mulvaney interested in buying Bud Light. That's possible, but they'd never worked with a controversial figure before for an endorsement deal. So why would they do it now? With that in mind, let's take a look at the New York Post article. Bud Light's controversial partnership with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney could have been a strategic attempt to permanently alter the brand's audience, according to a former anonymous employee. And this employee seems to have been involved at a relatively high level, not in the top executive office, but they do have some information. The popular beer brand came under fire in April after a post from Mulvaney's Instagram account featured a personalized Bud Light can. The backlash against the brand in response to partnering with the transgender figure led to a massive slump in sales. And a quick aside, the reason this company changed management was because Anheuser-Busch was part of what's called a roll-up. So another beer company used a financing technique called a roll-up, and that's when an investor like a private equity firm buys up companies in the same market and merges them together. Roll-up mergers combine multiple small companies into a larger entity that is better positioned to enjoy economies of scale. So the idea being, when you combine companies in the same industry into one company, you can take advantage of a lot of cost savings. But the people at Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch's company, had a very strong union that was preventing them from getting the cost cuts that they wanted. The cost cuts are important to a finance company because if they don't get cost cuts, it makes them less profitable, and that makes it harder to pay off the debt that they inevitably have to raise to pay for the cost of the company. It's like mortgaging a house. Not necessarily the most ethical thing in the world, but it's very normal in finance. Pay the employees less, pay off your debts, you get to own the company and it makes more money. Though the company's CEO insisted in a statement that it never intended to be part of a discussion that divides people, the ex-Anheuser-Busch worker suggested the move was intentional. Quote, employees expressed the fact that they were shocked. Why would they do this? What were they thinking? Especially now. This is the worst. It's like the worst time yet, but it's the best timing yet if a company were trying to change the way it operates from a corporate level. And that's just my opinion, he said to Outkick's Tommy Lahren in an interview. Quote, many of us are talking about that like they planned it in a way, like a strategic destruction of Bud Light. The whistleblower stated that nobody's happy about the fall in sales and everybody considers the move a very bad idea. However, on a corporate level, he claimed that this could have been part of a strategy to undermine the American company. When the company was bought by InBev, a lot of things changed from when it was owned by Anheuser-Busch. You know, it's an American brand, the whistleblower remarked. The company was bought in 2008 for $52 billion. That's a lot of money. And when you go back to what Anson Fredericks was saying, that Bud Light made up 40% of the sales of Anheuser-Busch, that's roughly a valuation of around $20 billion for what Bud Light was worth in 2008 if it's 40% of the business, roughly speaking. That's a big valuation. But if they want to cut down on the cost structure, they've probably analyzed this and thought to themselves, well, what are we going to lose? 10% of sales, 15% of sales in the long term? We can afford to do that, and with a lower cost structure, we'll make the employees pay for this in the long term. Finance is incredibly powerful, and I do find it fascinating, but it does come out as a little bit evil every now and then. The whistleblower explained that the company previously offered many benefits prior to its purchase by InBev. Through the fall in sales for the Bud Light brand, the former employee stated the corporation could restructure both employee benefits costs and its company standards through layoffs and renegotiating contracts. This is one of the things that when you're dealing with union contracts, they can be very tough, and you can't necessarily get lower costs if you're going through a different time in business. But Bud Light basically was making money even though it was shrinking as a brand. They could afford to pay these employees well as they had acquired them from the previous company. They seem to have wanted to get the cost structure more consistent with some of their other brands. Quote, Bud Light has been failing for many years. We've talked about that for many years. The numbers have just, little by little deteriorated, and it feels like they said, let's just put the nail in the coffin. Now we have a lot of layoffs, a lot of loss in production. It would be easy for them to restructure, let's say pay or contracts. Quote, it's obvious that they wouldn't just mistakenly do this and not expect these repercussions. Anybody could tell you what was going to happen, he commented. Nielsen IQ data provided to Fox Business by Bump Williams showed that for the week ending June 3rd, Bud Light sales were down 24.4%. I actually personally called Bump Williams, and he was very generous with his time and told me that was the revenue figure. The volume figure, which does even more affect employee work and employees production, because employees make the physical cans, they make the physical bottles. That number was down 28.2%. Most recently, Bud Light lost its title as the number one selling beer brand in dollar sales, Modelo Especial, losing the spot for the first time in over 22 years. Quote, I'm angry at the company on the corporate level just because they had to have known that this was going to happen, and they let it happen, the whistleblower remarked. This is something I had to notice also, because even when it happened and it seemed like it did explode out of control, and maybe it was carelessness, but there was no excuse for why the company didn't come out and make public statements and explain, for example, hey, Dylan Mulvaney is not our new spokesmodel. It was just one can that we made almost as a thank you for Dylan Mulvaney. There are never going to be more than one of those cans ever made. They could have said that. They could have even said it in a positive way and said, hey, if you ever find one of those, they'll probably be worth $1 million because we only made one of them. They're beyond rare. They're not in distribution. There are all kinds of ways they could have come across and said it. They didn't say it. The whistleblower concludes, quote, as for why, it's all just speculation. But from previous years and the way they tried to take away the way that the company is run from the past to now, it's not the same company it was when I started. It was a very interesting comment from this guy, James B., at the bottom of this article. Quote, I have actually seen it done to leverage union operations. The Anheuser-Busch breweries have been union strongholds and have refused to agree to cut wages and benefits especially while they make money on Bud Light. Anheuser-Busch never made a secret that they wanted to slash costs at the breweries by up to 40%. This simply looks to me like they wanted to stir up some issues and get the unions to panic. Instead, they destroyed the brand through incompetence. In typical millennial manner, the new bosses froze like deer and things got out of control. Insightful comment. When it gets to these bigger things with public companies, it's not like the local restaurant. It's not like they own a car dealership. They could go through the changes at Bud Light, the breaking of the unions, the renegotiation of all the contracts. They could say, hey, we lost whatever it'll be, $2 or $3 billion this year because of all of this restructuring. In public finance with public companies, that becomes a one-time charge. This is the same company that did a $100 billion acquisition of a company called SAB Miller out of South Africa, which didn't work out well, and they've lost billions on that, a lot more than 2 or 3. So for them to restructure their American operations for a cost of $3 or $4 billion, or maybe $5 billion when this is all said and done, really wouldn't be that big of an expense for them. And I certainly wouldn't put it past them. In another article on Outkick, which is covering this same interview with the same whistleblower, they took some different quotes that I think really add to the story. Quote, we would have these meetings and nobody was happy about the idea, he said. And everybody thinks it was a very bad idea. And you know, the sales and everything shows that. According to the whistleblower, executives from InBev, Anheuser-Busch's parent company, championed the decision to promote Mulvaney as part of Bud Light's brand. Alyssa Heinerscheid, Bud Light's vice president of marketing, currently on leave, admitted that the company's brand intended to no longer cater to fratty men. InBev alienated a large section, if not all of its workforce, by promoting the trans activists. The workforce was aware of what they were going to do. Heinerscheid was aware of what they were going to do. The parent company, InBev, the one that owns Anheuser-Busch, owns Bud Light, liked the idea of using Dylan Mulvaney and wanted to use the idea of Dylan Mulvaney. This wasn't a one-off mistake that nobody was aware of. And they're being so secretive at Anheuser-Busch about talking about how this all came to pass sounds extremely credible to me, because it doesn't sound like something that they're ever going to openly admit. We've seen a lot of companies do things that we know that they know are bad business moves. The race swap with The Little Mermaid didn't really make any sense, and the movie did not do the business it should do. The destruction of Marvel Studios by Disney by removing the characters that they knew were going to be successful for them and trying to push and introduce characters that didn't fit with the Marvel brand. The destruction of Star Wars by Disney. If you own the rights to Luke Skywalker and Mark Hamill is actually still alive, why would you not utilize him to make money? The woke agenda is a powerful pull. They do not want brands, character icons, inspirational things to support Western civilization as part of its overall culture to exist. They want to replace Western civilization with a new Marxist culture. I know it sounds crazy, but they want to do this, and it's almost like a religion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that this whistleblower is telling the truth? That yes, the company was aware, and yes, it was a planned strategic destruction of Bud Light. Maybe it didn't start out that way. Maybe it just started to happen that way. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you noticed the same thing that I've noticed, that Disney has gone and destroyed brands for really no reason? Why destroy Star Wars? Why destroy Marvel? Why race swap characters that were established one way into another race when the whole world knows the character? What are you trying to prove? What are you trying to do? Of course, a character can be any race, but why change them? Does it make any business sense, or is it part of some kind of larger, really strange agenda? We live in very interesting times. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Really appreciate you guys. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.